Well, good morning or good afternoon for some of you folks on the other side of the pond. Yeah, I'm Morris Maduro. This is the interactive session on innovation. So I've done several series, leadership develop, dynamic leadership, and then leadership development, sales, and then this one is innovation. So it's actually, I did them in reverse of how I see them playing out. So we innovate, then we have to be able to sell what we just created, and to scale what we've created and are selling, we have to be able to lead. So that's how I've organized the content. And we're going to focus doing the live events. We'll focus on innovation because it captures everything. You're going to have to sell it. You're going to have to scale. You're going to have to lead, as well as with ongoing operations. There, I put in the comments a link that you can use to come on screen. Basically, you're joining me on stage. So I have it in webinar mode. I can see comments coming in, but I'm on multiple platforms at the same time, so I'm not going to see everything. But if you come online and I have a waiting room, we'll put you in the waiting room or what have you. And what I'll do is walk through the form, the set of questions that I use when creating. And I've done this with large projects. It works all the way up to $1 million projects. Obviously, it takes more depth and more people and involvement, but the basic one pager is the same, because what we're doing is we're creating something that doesn't exist. We're filling a gap that is either a problem, meaning we have to get back up to status quo, or we're rising above status quo and designing into what I like to call infinite possibilities, because that's what it is out there. I like to start off by sharing a few points that if we agree with these points, it makes it easier to have the conversations. If you don't agree with them, that's not a problem. Just understand that this is where I'm coming from. And the way I look at it is, if everything is working fine, then you don't need to change it. This is not about let's change and come up with a new process for innovation. If just because we can. Now, there's a backdrop. I don't know if you've seen some of the videos, but I use the backdrop of a couple of things. And I talk about VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And this is going to continue in my view. First, if you look at, just take Moore's Law, where in the 1960s, he actually said it will double every year, but then it was extended out in this early 70s. It said technology capability will double every 18 months. And that was based on several things, but specifically the amount of information that they could fit onto a chip. That chip kept getting smaller and smaller. If you look at a compound curve, we are on the vertical part of that curve. Think about it as 40 years of doubling every 18 months. You can see we're on the steep part of that curve. And when on the steep part of the curve, this is why it's going so fast. I mean, we were just talking about ChatGPT a couple of years ago. Now it was being used in the background, but people just started talking about ChatGPT and we started seeing it. Look what's going on now already, and it's going to continue. Now, the good news is that I don't see it replacing humans across the board. It's because it doesn't think, it's making associations, but it does change things. And you look at the amount of offers that are out there with respect to whether it's lead generation or outreach, and it's automated using AI. Some of those will work, but some of them won't. And we saw the same thing going on with the .com era. That was a big change too, but that change wasn't, I use the word scary. It wasn't as intimidating as the artificial intelligence is, because we don't know what it is. Whereas the technology, we felt like it was just automating what we were already doing to a degree, made it faster. But at any rate, it's going to continue. Then you take that, and I also overlaid the Ray Dalio's book, The Changing World Order. But I look at it not in terms of the changing world order, because that gets people focused on the external. And I like to focus on what we can do, what we can control, what we have command of. And so I look at it as the cycle. the cycle that he talks about. And I used that graph. I'll just pull it out. Well, maybe I won't. The book's not where I thought it was. But essentially, he talks about 6 stages, and from rising, and then we peak, and then stage 4 is coming across the crest. Stage 5 is starting the downtrend, and then stage 6 is the crisis. And we're in late stage 4 or stage 5. And so if you look at it from that standpoint, forgetting about China or BRICS or any other nations, just understand that we're getting into the steep part of that decline curve. It doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen, right? Things can always be changed. We don't know what new thing will come in the future that might change that. Now, what I like to do is go through a couple of points that align with what I'm talking about, or I would say are somewhat foundational to what I'm talking about today. So first, 95% of our actions are out of habit. Most people would agree with that. And you could do a quick search on these terms real time. Like right now, you can just search them and come up with your own point of view on it. And we could always debate it, but I like to make decisions based on the general rule, not the exception. And and that kind of makes the point, right? If it's the exception that we're bringing into the debate, it kind of makes the point that the general rule is. So I first saw this in the 1970s, believe it or not, that 95% of our actions are out of habit, and it's not changed. It has not changed. I've done some looks, I've seen some other numbers, but it's been 95% for the most part all the way through. Another one that you could search is, if you understand this, that 95% of our actions are out of habit, or if you agree with this, then you'd also have to agree that telling people things is not enough. We actually have to do action. And in the armed forces, everything is hands-on. Yes, they teach you in the classroom, but then you actually touch it and you do it. You have to drill it, whether it's you do it, whether it's in the dark or in the day, and it's always progressive because they're building the habit. Then the second one is humans average 33,000 decisions a day. We're awake roughly 60 to 65,000 seconds a day for the most part. That means we're making a decision every other second, which when you consider that, I would replace decisions with stimulus response cycles, except that you're probably not going to see as many searches for stimulus response cycles as you would for decisions. So you have to make that leap. But even if it was half that, that's still a lot. It's certainly more than what we're doing consciously, and you can see how these two correlate. The other thing that this tells me is that we're priming ourselves habitually. So we're creating more yesterdays as we go into today's and tomorrow's, because we're priming ourselves, and out of scope for today, but priming and cognitive biases, those are mental heuristics, shortcuts that essentially shut down your conscious thinking, takes you out of that powerful present moment and just skips over the conscious. And then the next one is the subconscious processes at 11 million bits per second. And again, you can search that one. 11 million bits per second for processing speed on the subconscious, and the conscious mind only processes at 50 bits per second. So the speed, so we're 90, again, this is supporting the 95% of actions are out of habit, the 33,000 decisions per day, given the fact that it's processing 11 million bits per second. And since the conscious mind is only processing 50 bits per second, we're probably not even aware. And we know we're not aware. We've all done something like driving down the highway and you completely miss your exit and don't even remember missing it. So these decisions are being made in the background, but they're still being made. And that gets to the point of why we want to be thinking about innovation differently than we think about projects. I'm sorry, innovation differently, or in a different way than we think about operations. Now, a second point, and feel free to join in anytime, because I can cover these points as we go, but I wanted to get these parts out of here, out on the table. Now, the next thing I would offer is that when we're operating in that 95% of habits, actions out of habit, we're in a comfort zone. This is that nice operational where things are going along, a few hiccups here and there, but we've learned to handle them. You know, some people, not so much. And, you know, if you're a leader, you've probably learned to handle that a little bit better. Some people might have a little narrower comfort zone. You know, maybe they're like sort of in here. And when things get a little bit out of the norm, they start catastrophizing. The house is on fire. But as the manager or the leader, you see it coming. Well, there's another level that's above those, or I should say above that zone, and another one that's below the zone. And, you know, everybody has their own threshold. So no matter how comfortable you are, there is a place where you can get triggered or where you can start running into some internal challenges. I made the point last week that on the problem side, where it's a little bit easier to handle these because we've been there before. We know what the status quo looks like, and the problem is kind of confined. It's a little bit easier to explain and describe. But when we're innovating, when we're creating into the infinite possibilities, it makes it a little bit more difficult because we don't know what's going on out here. And because the subconscious sees the unfamiliar as a threat, it makes it creates tension and puts us on the ready for a stress response. The other thing that happens is, especially if this is something that you want to do towards your vision, your purpose, or what have you, there's a reason why it hasn't happened before. So, and that reason could have to do with beliefs. It could have to do with just anything, just feelings of inadequacy, imposter syndrome. It could be a myriad of things, but whatever it is, there's some stories in here associated with that. And there could be stories, beliefs, habits of thought, various things, anxiety of the future, regrets of the past. And that leads to this cognitive dissonance. And so with the cognitive dissonance, it makes it, again, these are reasons why it makes it difficult for us to innovate, to create new, because this creates noise and it can lead to anxiety. And that's why it's important to understand that 95% of what we do is done by habit, and that we make 33,000 decisions a day. And if this is all happening habitually, then we can surmise that what's going on when we're going into the new areas, it's not something that we're accustomed to. It doesn't fit the narrative. our habits are not serving us anymore. And this is why we have a different approach for innovation and projects. If this wasn't the case, we could address projects the same way we do operations. And if you do that, you're going to have some problems because you're not going to be paying attention to the dependencies. You won't be observing some of the parameters around the critical path. You won't be looking at how it connects to the vision or the purpose. You're just widgets in, widgets out, solving the problems as they come, and you'll create more problems. Now, project management has evolved quite a bit in the last 20 years, especially with computerization and all that, and agile. And in a way, they've operationalized project management. That said, we still need project leadership, and that's the conversation that I'm in. So I haven't seen anybody come in. I'm going to go for a few more minutes. I'll start answering some questions that I have just to kind of prime it. How do I help managers become leaders, not just task managers, especially in a fast-changing business? There's two parts of this. One is I do think that you want to have a continuous ongoing development plan. I think any leader or manager who comes into your organization should have a development plan that lasts for at least 2 years. Now, that doesn't mean that every week or every month they're going to be in some kind of training. But at the end of 6 months, they should know how to do X, Y, and Z. Consider this. If a doctor goes into a hospital or a dental hygienist goes in to work at a dentist, these are new employees. The owner of the dentist, the administration of the hospital, they know that this doctor or this hygienist, they know what to do. They know the basics. Now, they have to learn how that operation functions, but they know the basics. If a team hires or adds a quarterback, if signs a new quarterback or a goalie, they know that this person understands the fundamentals of the game. But they still go through training. And that's the point we miss in business. You may hire a marketing person, and because they have a marketing degree and they have some marketing experience, it could be completely different from what you are doing. So we have to have some sort of a plan where we take people through. And that development plan, it doesn't necessarily have to be training, right? For the senior leaders, it could be something that you observe and check off. We want to know that this person can deliver a tough message that's uncomfortable. And you may not be able to do that for 9 months, but you want to make sure that you've seen them do that. You can give some coaching, just know, because see, sports teams practice for the game. They know the game is coming at the end of the week or the middle of the week, whatever. With business, we don't really have an opponent. We don't have a direct opponent trying to stop us. What we do have is the external environment that can throw a crisis our way. So our big game is like the crisis, and we have to be ready for that. And rather than not know if your leaders have the skills, we want to have a development plan. So the question is, how do I help new managers become leaders? One is have a development plan, and the leadership is part of that. And you should also keep hands-on in mind. One of the things to start, if you have first of all, we want to have succession planning going on in our mind at all times. So if you think about having high potential people, let's give them some leadership assignments. You make them a project lead, or maybe they're a leader on a sub project, or they're a leader on a big task of a project. Something, have them doing where you're able to see how they interact with people, how they handle situations. And I would also break it into two parts. One is organizing the work, and then the other one is dealing with the range of human emotions, et cetera. I would not try to check both of those at the same time. You first have to know that they can organize the work and work through that. And once they can organize the work, then we deal with the people side, because if you don't do that and you do it together, you could be thinking that there's a people issue and it's really an organizing the work issue. But the short answer is have a development plan, have it thought out, and make it progressive. And for a new person, especially a high potential, they might have touch points or metrics that happen every 3 months for that 2 years. I wouldn't sleep on this part of it, because you don't have the time. If you don't have the time to do it during normal operational mode, you're not going to have the time to do it during crisis. And then you're winging it and just creating new problems. See if I got anybody coming in. And let's see. Yeah, this is a good one. How do I shift our culture from compliance to ownership without losing structure or accountability? And this is an interesting one, because I've seen it so much where people struggle with empowering their employees, and employees struggle with being empowered. So first, let's deal with the leader side. The leaders struggle with empowering the employees. The obvious one is people don't want to give up control. But the other one is back to that subconscious versus conscious. We're processing so fast. And as a leader, we've been there, done that. We're processing at a lot of times at the subconscious level, that's the 11 million bits per second. Whereas the employee is having to, or the subordinate is having to process and think through it. It's going to take them longer. So we have to be patient. You can't even get to the point where you're just telling, think this through and come back to me. It's almost like the person who's looking over the employee's shoulder as the employee navigates on the screen, and they're pointing to where to go. You've got to let the people struggle. You have to let people struggle on the edge of their ability, and that's going to look like it's taking forever, but it's not. And then the other one, I think that the challenge that I've seen with leaders is that they tend to show emotion too quickly. They're used to compliance, and when something goes wrong, it shows up. It may show up because they're genuinely annoyed, or it may show up because they're thinking about what they're going to have to do with their boss. Again, and this is important, because the subordinates will make mistakes. And as they make mistakes, they have to know that there's a safe place. You want bad news early as the leader, especially when you're developing somebody new. You want bad news early. And in order to do that, you have to reinforce that it's okay. It's a safe place. You can give me the bad news. On the employee side, especially your high potentials, and I've seen this with the ones who are fresh out of school. They're so accustomed to getting A's, and the way to get an A is to figure out what's going to be on the test and study that. And also that when in doubt, do what the professor wants. And it's difficult sometimes for them to have a point of view. So you have to pull that out of them. You have to get them working with little things, little steps, because expressing your point of view when you haven't done that before could be scary and difficult. So we need to give them those baby steps and giving them exposure, giving them feedback, letting them know it's safe, and recognizing them when they're right. This is the growth mindset. You're teaching them to have a growth mindset, and reminding them that even a great baseball player is missing 7 out of 10 times at bat. It's okay. And that's how the development happens. If you wait until they're in a leadership position to start working on that, it's too late. So did I catch all of that question? If you just joined, again, there's a link in the comments. You can use that link to come on stage. And we'll do this again at the third Friday in July. We'll do it again then, and in the same format. How do I know when it's time to change the business model versus just fixing internal operations? So part of it is that I talk about with VUCA and the way things are going, the decline, the economic cycles that we're in. There's going to be a lot more change. We don't have the luxury of a steady state like we did 2 decades ago. We're not going to see, in my opinion, that constant steady state. But I do think that you want your business model flexible enough so that you're not thinking about changing the business model. So you have your vision, and you could keep your vision the same. It may tweak slightly, but if your vision is broad enough the way it should be, it can stay the same. And then your business model might have to shift. So you think about the Netflix blockbuster, so much has been written about that. The vision could have been the same, getting content out to the masses, but the model was different. The business model was different. And that's what Netflix did. They changed the business model, and they caught Blockbuster flat-footed because Blockbuster was committed to their model. So sometimes you do have to change the model. But the question is, how do you know when it's time to change the business model versus just fixing internal operations? And I think that part of that is metrics and KPIs. So you want to have a zone, and when your KPIs are inside that zone, you're fine. You're not going to be changing things. But you do want to look for pressure. You do want to look for pressure points. And I would say if you're in doubt, then test it. So instead of thinking about changing the business model, you can think about adding another capability into the operating model, and you can start testing. That's where I would rather see people go. And then when you have enough data that says it's not working, then you change the business model. So you can add new products, you can add new services, you can change how you deliver them, and that could all be inside the operating model, and you can test that. Next time, we'll talk about different ways of easy testing at a low cost, because the cost of testing can be a barrier, especially when you start thinking about web development and marketing costs and advertising and the agencies and getting people to do the copywriting. You want to have, if you're big enough, and when I mean big enough, I'm talking about 10 to 15 people, you want to have somebody in-house who could do skunkworks type testing very quickly. You should be able to come up with an idea and have it out in play being tested within a week, just on a skunkworks basis, and to get the data, to get enough information. And that's how I would work through that. What does innovation look like if we don't sell technology or develop new products? I think, and this is the point about that decline line. I think, and so just so you, it's like this, and then you have stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and so we're over here, late stage 4, or going into stage 5, and then you have these mini cycles. And the point that I was making last week is that when you have mini cycles in the larger cycle, small cycles in the big cycle, when they coincide, this can be very, very rapid. This point from here to here can be very, very fast compared to these. So this may look like the same. It's just another, adjustment. It's just another correction. It's just another small downturn, but it can turn big in a hurry. And this is where we are. And so I think it is going to change. So rather than think of it as innovation as new products or new technology, it's how do we continue to serve our audience, our constituents. If it's a nonprofit organization, you have donors, and then you have the people that you're serving, and it's constantly talking to them. It's getting feedback. It's having live sessions. It's getting on the phone. It's having focus groups and find out where the needs are, and you're adjusting to the needs. So you may not be selling something, or you may not be providing technology, but you are providing a service, meaning you're filling a gap. And so being clear on what that gap is, being clear on the vision, and then you're looking for better ways to do that gap. And I would say when we get into like, we're going to go through, what are you doing? Who is it for? Why? And then in scope, out of scope, guiding principles. That's what we're going to use. That's that one form. So maybe I'll spend more time on that as we lead up to that third week in July. But using that form, that's what we'll go through. People who come on screen will go through that step by step with real world problems. And once you have that framed out, what I like about it is that it defines both what this looks like when you break above. It defines that. And it aligns with the 95% and the 33,000 decisions per day. All right, so I'm going to leave it there. So I'll still have events on Fridays, but I want to start moving into the interactive. I may do an interactive one next week since we didn't have anyone come on stage this time. In fact, that's probably what I'll do. I'll just keep doing them weekly until we start getting people on stage, and then I'll shift into the third Friday. All right, take care. Have a great week. Or I should say a great weekend and then a great week.